Welcome to Markets Now. I'm Michelle Rook with Tom Fitzmeyer of Summit Commodity Brokerage, and mostly lower trade today with the exception of cattle, futures, and soybean oil. And let's talk about the grains first, Tom. It just seemed like a risk-off day there, mostly in preparation for these possible tariffs to be announced this afternoon.
Yeah, no doubt, and I think it's kind of a classic case. The president has even said the maximum tariff is what he's going to announce this afternoon. So we're finally getting to the point where we have at least some idea of what the worst case scenario will be. We're finally going to get some clarification, and I think all that's going to be positive for the markets ultimately. Everybody, it's been a kind of a risk off, sit on the sidelines, wait to see what happens. And I think once we get past these tariff announcements, then we can go back to corn and soybean fundamentals and kind of see where we're at and how demand shapes up. Export demand's been quite good in corn. Matter of fact, I wouldn't be surprised if in the next couple WASDE reports they didn't bump their export estimates for corn a little bit. So I think you get that behind us. I don't know that, and that'll be great. I don't know that there's a whole lot of weather premium either in that December corn contract or the Nova bean contract for that matter. So maybe we can put a little weather premium into those prices going into the spring too.
Yeah. Before we talk about weather, really the key here on these tariffs is who retaliates and how much, right?
Yeah, it's kind of a two-tiered thing. I mean, what President Trump says is one thing. How everybody the dirty 15, so to speak, responds is going to be really interesting. And I'm assuming some of them are probably going to drop their tariffs, call it good, and we're going to proceed on. Um, Tariffs have a way of being absorbed by all sorts of people involved in the supply chain, and so the damage doesn't tend to be as bad as certainly not as bad as what the trade's anticipating across the board here, or has been for the last month or two. Again, it'll be nice to get it behind us, and then everybody can start making their adjustments and doing what they need to do to sort of get trade back on track here.
So you mentioned weather. Let's go back and talk about that because it looks like we're going to have maybe 5 days of heavy rains down in the southeastern Midwest into the Delta. And so, getting some of this crop planted and replanted is going to start to be a little bit of a focus for the corn market, isn't it?
It's interesting. Last week they were starting to talk about warm soil temperatures in central Illinois and on south, and people getting a little anxious about getting going and calling and wanting to know what the insurance starting date was and all that. Well, this weather forecast for the next 10 days, maybe even 2 weeks, looks pretty wet and cold. So it's going to push planting back a little bit. And again, that could be a little bit supportive too. Certainly those wet areas. I'm not exactly sure, about drownouts and how their soil dries in the far southern areas, but certainly 6 to 8 inches of rain can't be good. Yeah, it's going to take a while to sort that out here.
Yeah, especially if you're trying to plant 95.3 million acres of corn, you got to get every acre in.
Right, exactly. I
Yeah.
think and if we have a dry spring, that'll probably get done. But if you have any disruptions, that may be hard to accomplish. And
Yeah.
you've got that backup of planting beans later if you need to. So I don't know that whole acreage thing is set in concrete yet.
Couple of the bright spots, though, soybean oil was higher, and we've had a big run in soybean oil on news that we might get some higher blending levels or mandates in the renewable fuel standard.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's been on a tear this week. It's finally nice to see it happen. We've had some negotiations between big oil and the biofuels industry. They've made a presentation to the EPA that it looks like is probably going to be accepted. So I mean, I think all that's positive for soybean oil. Having said that, we've had a very nice rally. Soybean oil is way overbought. A lot of that it will not be implemented until, well, at best the end of the year. So I wouldn't be surprised at all to see bean oil set back a little bit. But boy, it's had a nice run up, and certainly strengthened bean oil is positive for the soybean market. Although you have had some unwinding of that long meal short bean oil spread, and that has kind of reversed itself a little bit, putting some pressure on meal. But ultimately, I think all that's going to be good for the soybean market.
let's talk about the wheat market. We got a nice push after we saw the lower acreage, and we've also had, you know, a lower Aussie crop. There's been some positive things up until today when we've seen some tariff news. But do you feel like that market is trying to carve out a bottom?
I do. I think you also maybe some optimism that something was going to get settled between the Ukraine and Russia, and that might allow some wheat to flow out of there a little better. So those are all unknowns. But yeah, you get wheat here down in the low fives, and I don't think there's a lot of downside potential. And you could certainly, if you have some positive news in all those fronts, you could certainly put 40, 50, 60 cents back on wheat without a great deal of trouble, I think. So this isn't a place I don't think where you want to get real negative wheat.
Yeah. And globally, if you look at the extended forecast, it's going to turn hotter, drier in the southern plains. And I think the Black Sea is still hot and dry, aren't they?
Yeah, that's my understanding, right? So I
Yeah.
mean, having said that, it's really hard to kill wheat, and we
Yeah.
talk about it a lot. And you hear all these, they have a lot of hand wringing about the wheat crop, but generally speaking, it turns out to be all right most of the time. So I don't want to get too carried away with that as a bullish factor, I guess.
You bet. So, cattle market, one other bright spot here today, and I feel like it's Groundhog Day because we're cracking out some new contract highs in the live cattle again. You know, is it just going to be that we just continue to see these little setbacks in a bigger bull market and just crack new highs all the time?
I mean, it's been a bright spot for months. Uh, we just don't build the cow herd, and we can only put so much weight on to to keep the tonnage up. So and demand continues to hang in there. Quite the consumer seems to be doing well enough at least to pay up for beef. So yeah, I mean at some point we're gonna have it topped out here, but it sure doesn't show any signs that it wants to. And today was certainly a positive close, that's for sure.
Yeah, and for looking at tariffs, really, that's almost a positive for the beef market, isn't it?
Yeah, that's relates to back to Mexico, I think, and the fact that Mexico said that they're not going to be retaliating very much was, I think, part of behind what was so strong in the beef market today. So I don't know. I guess we'll have to see how all this shakes out. Like we've said before, what we do is one thing, but what the people we've imposed tariffs on do is a whole nother level of unknown.
Yeah, and it might mean less beef imports coming in, so that might be a little bit positive. What about
Right.
the hog market? Tariff fears kind of continue to hold that market back too, right?
Yeah, I mean, if corn, excuse me, if cattle continue to go higher, I don't see how pork industry can't do anything but be well supported. The hog and pig report was the numbers were all friendly in almost every category when that came out the other day. So it's hard to get bearish the animal proteins at all. So obviously tariffs are going to play a factor in that. But in terms of numbers and the demand for that type of protein, I think you have to be pretty positive.
Yeah, I agree with you on the hogs and pigs report. It just felt like we didn't get much of a positive response to that report, as bullish as it was.
No, I was surprised. I think that's coming. Maybe we had other things in the mix that kept it from happening, but I think ultimately that's going to be supportive longer term, just like the lower numbers in cattle have been.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks so much, Tom Fitzgerald with Summit Commodity Brokerage. That is Markets Now.